I grew up in a house where the word family meant something different each day. My mother, Anna, had a knack for starting over. She called it resilience. I called it chaos. By the time I turned 10, I had known at least 6 men she referred to as Dad. Each one came with their quirks, their promises, and their quick departures. But one constant remained. I was never the priority. At 12, I stopped trying to bond with these men. It was easier to smile politely, keep my head down, and wait for the inevitable goodbye. The constant changes left me feeling invisible, like a supporting character in someone else's story. My real father was a distant memory, a shadow in old photographs. Whenever I asked about him, my mother would sigh and dismissively say, "He wasn't cut out for family life." But deep down, I suspected the truth was more complicated. Perhaps he couldn't handle her whirlwind nature, the way she leapt from one relationship to the next without pausing to consider the wreckage left behind. One winter, when I was 13, she introduced me to Richard, her newest partner. He seemed different. Polished, calm, and unusually kind, he carried an air of stability that felt foreign in our home. For the first time, there was talk of permanence. They were planning to get married. I remember sitting in a dimly lit restaurant as Richard's teenage son, Luke, sat across from me, studying his menu with practiced ease. He was everything I wasn't: confident, accomplished, and clearly loved by his father. The ceremony was small but extravagant enough to signal that this wasn't just another chapter in my mother's tumultuous love life. When we moved into Richard's spacious house, it felt like stepping into another world. The furniture was pristine, the kitchen gleamed, and the air smelled of fresh flowers instead of the faint mustiness I had grown used to. For a while, life felt almost normal. But normalcy, I learned, was a fragile illusion. My mother's jealousy soon took root. She hated how effortlessly Richard and Luke included me in their lives. Any time Richard praised me or Luke invited me to join him on an outing, her smiles grew tight, and her words turned sharp behind closed doors. "Don't get too close to them," she'd say, her voice laced with bitterness. "They're not really your family." I tried to heed her warnings, but resisting their kindness was like trying to ignore a warm fire on a freezing night. Richard made an effort to involve me in family activities, and Luke treated me like a younger sibling, sharing jokes and teaching me things he thought I should know. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that my mother's resentment was building into something darker. One day, when I was 14, I overheard a heated argument between my mother and Richard. She accused him of favoring me over her, of undermining her role as a parent. His response was calm but firm. "Maybe if you showed her a little more love, she wouldn't need mine." That night, my mother's anger spilled over to me. She lashed out with words that cut deeper than any physical blow. "You're nothing but a burden," she spat. "I should have stopped at one mistake. Your father." The next morning, I packed a small bag and left. I had no clear plan, only a burning need to escape. With trembling hands, I called my grandmother, a woman I had only met a handful of times. When she answered, her voice was warm, but cautious. "I've been waiting for this call," she said. "Come. You'll be safe here." My grandmother's house was a modest sanctuary in a quiet town. She didn't ask many questions, for which I was grateful. Instead, she focused on making me feel at home. We fell into a routine of morning walks, shared meals, and evenings spent watching old movies. It was the kind of stability I had never known. Months turned into years. I finished high school, got a part-time job, and began to rebuild myself. My grandmother's unwavering support was the anchor I desperately needed. She taught me that love didn't have to come with conditions or manipulation. It could be steady, quiet, and real. When I turned 16, Richard and Luke appeared at my grandmother's doorstep. They looked uneasy, almost apologetic. "We're sorry for everything," Richard said, his voice heavy with regret. We should have seen what was happening and done something sooner. Luke handed me a small gift, a book I had once mentioned wanting to read. Their sincerity caught me off guard, but I welcomed their efforts to reconnect. Over time, they became regular visitors. Richard's kindness felt genuine, and Luke's easy humor made it hard to hold on to resentment. My mother's absence, once a gaping wound, began to feel more like a scar, a reminder of pain that had healed but would never fully disappear. Then, when I was 26, my mother resurfaced. She arrived unannounced, her eyes red-rimmed and her hands clutching a worn handbag. I need your help, she said, her voice trembling. The years had not been kind to her. She looked older than her age, worn down by a life of poor decisions. Richard and Luke kicked me out, she confessed. I have nowhere to go. My grandmother's disapproving glare was as sharp as a knife. She crossed her arms and said nothing, leaving me to face the woman who had once made me feel so small. Why should I help you? I asked, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. Because I'm your mother, she replied, as if that alone erased years of neglect and cruelty. I felt a surge of anger, but also a pang of pity. Here she was, stripped of her bravado, asking for forgiveness she had never given me. You've never acted like a mother, I said, my words measured but firm. I found my family elsewhere. Richard and Luke treated me better than you ever did. You can't just waltz back into my life and expect me to forget everything. Her tears flowed freely, but they didn't move me. Instead, I thought of the countless nights I had cried alone, wishing for a mother who cared. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'll do better. It's too late for that, I replied. You made your choices, and now you're living with the consequences. My grandmother stepped forward, her voice cold and clear. You've caused enough damage. Leave now, or I'll call the police. My mother hesitated, her eyes darting between us before turning and walking away. It was the last time I saw her. In the years that followed, I built a life I was proud of. I married a kind, steady man and became a mother to 2 wonderful children. Richard and Luke remained part of my life, their bond with me unshaken by the passage of time. My grandmother's wisdom became my guiding light, her lessons woven into the fabric of the family I created. Looking back, I realize that family isn't defined by blood. It's the people who stand by you, who lift you up when you're at your lowest, and who love you without condition. My mother taught me what family shouldn't be, but Richard, Luke, and my grandmother showed me what it could be. And for that, I will always be grateful. Years later, as I tucked my own children into bed, their laughter filling the room, I often thought about the winding road that had brought me to this moment. The lessons of love, trust, and resilience weren't things I learned from textbooks or fairy tales. They were earned through every heartbreak and triumph. One evening, my daughter asked, "Mom, what does family mean?" Her question hung in the air, so innocent yet profound. I smiled, my thoughts drifting back to my grandmother, to Richard, and to Luke. Family, I said, stroking her hair, isn't about who you're born to. It's about who stands by your side, who makes you feel safe, and who loves you just the way you are. The years brought more clarity, more growth. Even in moments of doubt, I knew that my past no longer defined me. It shaped me, sure, but the person I'd become had risen above those early years. It was the love I received, unexpected and unwavering, that built the foundation of my own happy family. Every time I saw my grandmother playing with my children, every time Richard or Luke visited, bringing gifts and laughter, I felt a wave of gratitude. Their kindness had been my salvation, their belief in me a lifeline. And for my children, I vowed to be the mother I never had, a promise sealed in every bedtime story and every reassuring hug. Richard and Luke's bond with me grew even deeper as we all aged. They celebrated milestones with me, helped my children with their homework, and even guided me through challenges at work. They became pillars of strength not just for me, but for my entire family. My grandmother's health began to decline when I was in my late 30s. It was one of the hardest periods of my life, but I drew strength from the family I'd built. I cared for her the way she had cared for me, ensuring her final years were filled with love and comfort. Her passing left a hole in my heart, but her legacy lived on in every lesson she taught me. Today, as I write this, I look at my children playing in the yard and think of the incredible journey that brought me here. The bonds of family I've forged, through love, hardship, and healing, are my greatest triumph. And for that, I will always be thankful.